so much. Welcome again, folks who are joining us. My name is Ginevra Wetmore, and I'm the executive director here at Sustainable Woodstock. And on behalf of our board and the co-host for the event tonight, which is Pentangle Arts, I would like to say how very excited and delighted we are to bring you this special Earth Day event with Reverend Mariama White-Hammond. We, Sustainable Woodstock, are based in Vermont. So let us begin by honoring the cultural, spiritual, and environmental traditions of the Abenaki, the indigenous peoples of these lands. This beautiful place we all love is here because of the wisdom and stewardship of indigenous ancestors and elders, past and present. We would also like to express our very sincere thanks to our partner for this event, Pentangle Arts, and to Vermont Interfaith Power and Light, whose support has helped to make this event tonight possible. Vermont Interfaith Power and Light is a faith-based response to climate change. They seek to empower members of Vermont's faith and spiritual communities to advocate for our Earth and future generations by helping people take action in their houses of worship, homes, workplaces to conserve energy and use it efficiently, and increase the use of renewable energy. So thank you to them for helping to sponsor this evening.
Thank you, Ginevra. Now I am delighted to introduce you to our speaker. Reverend Mariama White-Hammond is an advocate for ecological and social justice, youth engagement, and spirit-filled organizing. She brings a life of diverse experiences to her environmental and faith teachings. She was the executive director of Project Hip Hop, a youth organization dedicated to educating about civil rights and the inspiring activism among young people. Reverend Mariama is a pastor and founder of the New Roots African Methodist Episcopal Church in Dorchester, Massachusetts. She served as the chief of energy, environment, and open space in the city of Boston. And in this capacity, she led climate and energy policy, historic preservation, food justice, and open space efforts. Welcome, Reverend Mariama.
Thank you for having me. So I am really thankful to be here, and really thankful for those of you who have chosen to be with us when I know how beautiful it is outside. And I have to say that I knew when I walked in today, I've been outside a couple times today, I said, oh my gosh, we're going to be competing with this amazing weather. So I'm glad that we're recording this meeting and that all the people who chose to just take in this beautiful, beautiful dose of spring will get to watch afterwards. So that means that all of you who are here are going to be doing double duty to help us frame this conversation. And I want to note before I go into my prepared remarks that I very much hope this will be a dialogue. I think we are in a moment, and I'll talk about this in greater depth, where I think a lot of us are in a season of deep questioning, trying to understand what's happening in the world and what we can do about it. So I hope, I want to give you a heads up in advance. I do not have the answer to this moment. I am trying to find my way through the fog of it, but I do have some things that I have been reflecting on and things that I've turned back to and dealt with some deeper questions around that I hope will be helpful for us. But I really, really hope that you will bring your full self into the conversation, what you know, the questions you're sitting with, the places that are giving you hope, and the challenges that you're facing. Because I do believe that our way out of this is only through it. And so we're going to take some time to lean in. But I'll offer a few, remarks at the beginning to help frame this moment. And then we'll go from there. So, as I said, I'm Reverend Mariama White-Hammond, and I want to begin by sharing a bit of my own story because it's the thing that I can talk about with some level of expertise, although I routinely, as I think other people might know, look back over my life. I'm 45, so I'm like probably pretty squarely at that midway point, and I'm feeling it. And it definitely makes me go back and look at my life and reflect and sometimes see it a little differently than I did 20 years ago. But I am the pastor of New Roots AME Church here based in Boston, and I am the child of two pastors. I grew up here in the city of Boston. Both my parents are beneficiaries of the civil rights movement. They were among a generation of college students who came to Massachusetts. My dad from Philadelphia, my mom from a little bit of everywhere because my grandfather was in the Air Force, so she, lived in a number of different places. But they both came here in the first wave of colleges admitting African American students in significant numbers. And they came here to the Boston area. And my mom was an undergrad at BU. My dad was an undergrad at Harvard. And they met as they were both applying to and about to go to medical school. And I grew up here, and an important part of my life was that we went to this church, St. Paul AME Church in Cambridge, where that story of being the first in one's family to go to college, that story of being sometimes the first person to go into somebody's in your field, was the story of so many people who I grew up knowing, and going to church with, including Ronald McNair, the first Black astronaut who used to teach Taekwondo in the basement at church. And I remember that being a space where at the time I thought I was going to be an international human rights lawyer, and I was planning to be the first Black president, the first female president, the first Black female president. That was my frame for what I was going to do with my life. But I went to this little school, and I remember one of the most powerful memories I have of that was when Rosa Parks came to visit our school. And we reenacted the bus boycott for her, which in retrospect, I'm like, she knows what happened. She did not need us to show her what happened. But I'm sure she was endeared by seeing 4-year-olds act out getting on the bus. But I had this deep sense that I could do anything, I could be anything, that my ancestors had done important work that made my life and my life possible and my possibilities larger than I could ever imagine. And it was out of that it was also during the 80s. People remember in the 80s when you also had to have a secret password because everybody was worried about getting kidnapped. I don't know if there's other people who grew up during that time, but anyway. So Rosa Parks was our secret password. If anybody came to pick me up from school, they had to say Rosa Parks. But and so I had this deep sense of what is my purpose? How do I move forward? What my ancestors have passed on to me? What is my contribution? And I remember in junior high and high school, I started studying the civil rights movement. My first act of activism was to boycott Coca-Cola because of their engagement in South Africa. And I then got to be part of the children's choir that sang for Nelson Mandela when he came to visit Boston. But I say all that to say, I started off with this deep sense of what was possible and of the fact that people had sacrificed to make things better for me. And I spent a lot of my time studying the civil rights movement. And to be honest with you, asking God, why wasn't I born then? That's I really wish I had been alive during that time. And I remember thinking, wow, it's never going to be possible to make that much of an impact in the world as they did back then. So I say that because I think, sometimes you have to be careful what you wish for, what you pray for, because I think we are now once again in a moment where we're making we have the opportunity to make some really powerful decisions about who we will choose to be. And I want to lift that up as a gift. Not one that feels like much of a gift right now. I don't know about you, but I turn the news on. It does not feel like a gift. But I think we are in a movement moment, a moment where we will either continue to devolve in a very challenging direction, or things might just get bad enough, challenging enough, overwhelming enough that we might choose to do something radically different. And so I want to have a conversation tonight about how we lean into this moment as an opportunity for something radically different. Before we talk about that conversation, I do think we have to have a little bit of a conversation about how we got here. And I am not going to try to tell you in like 4 data points exactly how we landed in this moment. But I am going to name a few challenges that I think are guiding this moment and are things we need to be paying attention to. The first thing I think goes without saying, which is that some piece of what we're experiencing right now is truthfully who we have always been. I think we need to be honest about the fact that as a country, we have always struggled to truly hold the notion of we the people to actually be all of us. From our very beginning, as we know, folks came and there was more than enough land for indigenous people to be able to have everything they had, and for white folks to still be able to be part of it. There was enough land for that to be possible. And that is not the choice that was made. The choice was to see scarcity even in the midst of overwhelming abundance. The choice was to take, and the choice was to use people through slavery and other forms of subjugation to fuel opportunity for the few. And we need to be honest that that's part of our history. Truthfully, doesn't make us unique as humans. Humans have been doing and making those kind of decisions for a very long time. But I do think it is important for us to be honest about that. And that is some part of what we see happening. And I want to name that that's not just a tradition of the original settlers of this land, but that's a tradition and a way of being that we've continued to carry. And it's not just the most privileged folks that carry that. I think we are in a moment, for instance, where many different immigrant groups have had the option of whether or not they're going to become white, right? The Irish at one point weren't really considered white, and Italians weren't necessarily considered white. And over time, people have made choices to join the power structure. And I think that's a conversation that I know, for instance, is very active right now in the Latina community around who gets the option to be white and whether or not people want to go in that direction. So I think it is important for us to recognize in our history that some of the things we're dealing with are things that have always been here, that we've always struggled with, and that human beings have also always struggled with. Now, I will say there's American exceptionalism in all things often, and so we do take it to sometimes whole new levels that maybe other people haven't achieved. But there's some piece of this that is human. And I think acknowledging that being okay with that, naming it is important. So, is racism and sexism and classism part of the reason we're in this moment? Absolutely. But the second thing I think is worth really leaning into is this conversation about the American dream, which, to be honest with you, I think is the only, or I shouldn't say the only, but it is kind of the core thing that holds us together. The American dream, I would say, in many ways, is the religion of this country. In fact, when you look at our religious traditions, most of them have adapted themselves to honor the American dream, even if it doesn't align with our spiritual texts, because the American dream is the organizing notion, the one thing that unfortunately, for good or for bad, we can all hold out. This notion that we should all have the opportunity to do better. And I want to name, that's not necessarily a bad thing. There are some parts of that that are beautiful. There's some parts of that, the notion that our children should do better than we have, that's not a bad notion. The notion that we sacrifice to give them an opportunity to move forward, that often comes from a good place for humans. But anything taken too far, anything without balance, can go from being a dream to a nightmare. And so in this moment, I want us to name that reality and the fact that it's slipping away from more and more and more people is a large part of why we are here. And I think about this specifically. I don't know how many people watched after the elections. There was a instance where one of the late night hosts went out and they sent someone out and they were interviewing some folks that were in a line, an immigration line. And they were like, how do you feel about the election? And two people said, yeah, if I could vote, I would have voted for Trump. And you could see that the reporter was like, tell me more. And I remember being baffled by that. And then I took a moment to think about the fact that if I had sacrificed everything, crossed deserts, been lost, taken every ounce of money that I had to get somewhere, to achieve something, and if the one thing that kept me alive and kept me driving and kept me working, and I finally got there and you said, that dream is slipping away, maybe, just maybe, I would say whoever says they're going to give me that dream, they're going to make that possible, that's who I'm supporting. Maybe, just maybe, the idea that the thing that you sacrificed everything for was slipping away is just too much to bear when you've sacrificed so much to achieve that. And so this notion of the American dream as the thing that we worship, the thing that unites us, the thing that can bring us together, even across all the divides that we haven't necessarily worked through, is slipping away, is really hard. And then I think the final thing I want to note that's not just us in this moment, but that I think we are struggling, and we've been struggling for a while, to find a sense of agency and possibility. And that is something I've seen so much as somebody who works with young people. I started off with the story of how I grew up, because as I've worked with young people over the years, I've realized how much of a gift it is to believe that anything is possible, and to be in a community where people are telling you that you have a sense of purpose and destiny, and God has called you to do something in the world. Just that sense that I can do something, I can be something, I can achieve something, I can dream of something beyond my wildest imagination and make it possible. is something that actually so few of us have. And that did not just start yesterday. That didn't just start even a few years ago. It's something I've noticed with young people, but I think it's something I've noticed the truth with many more of us. And so when you have a society where there are deep divisions and where the one thing that brings people together seems to be slipping away, and where your sense of your own possibility and efficacy are deeply, deeply deficient, it does leave you open for people wanting someone, anyone, who says they can fix it, regardless of whether or not what they're saying makes much sense. And so I bring those three things up as we ask this question about how could this moment be the gift we are all waiting for. I know, I see this in the chat. No does not feel like a gift. I got you. I got you. It does not feel like a gift. And I want to just be honest. Last weekend was the weekend where I go into fasting for Holy Week. I go into full silence, no television, no internet, none of that. And I just spend some time in reflection. And I want to be honest with you. In November and December, I could not have talked to you from this place of hope because I was in a place of, I was depressed. Yep. I was depressed by the state of the country, and it didn't get any better once he got into office, and I got triggered by every, headline. But I do feel like I have finally come to a place where I'm asking the question, and I am a person of faith, so I'm asking the question, Spirit, where are you moving in this? But if you are not, if Spirit is not what you call it, or you don't believe that that's moved, then just what is the opportunity? What is the possibility in this moment? And I hope that we'll hold that question. So again, as I was saying, there are these three challenges I think we're facing. Our lifelong struggles with racism and sexism and nativism and homophobia and all of the isms that are about tribalism, and that the American dream is slipping away, and that we have lost a sense of efficacy and possibility. So those are the three things we're challenged with. And I believe we can respond faithfully in this moment if we pay attention to those three things and ask, how do we move in this moment in a way that helps us to deal with those? So I want to say first, the main thing I'm hearing from people is about resistance. And I want to say, I do believe resistance is important and insufficient. Absolutely insufficient. And so I want to name three frames, and then I'll talk really quickly about some practices, and then I want to stop talking so that we can actually be talking to each other. But resistance is part of it. But I want to say that I think we need three things. Resistance, and they are RST. There was a point where I was doing RSV, but I just felt like that sounds really negative. But anyway, so I've been doing RST. Resistance, solidarity, and transformation. Transformation has to be our ultimate goal. What is the world we are trying to build and move into? But we cannot be off building some world that we want to move into and completely ignoring what is happening right now. We actually have to move in such a way that we are responding to these moments in a way that transforms us towards where we're trying to go. And so I want to suggest that there are three practices we have to hold. So if we were trying to do resistance, solidarity, and transformation, one of the things I would say is the good news around that is they don't have to be three separate modalities. They actually can be held together. And I want to suggest they can do that through three different practices that I think will help us embrace that. The first is reflective practice. You can call it spiritual practice, you can call it whatever, but something that builds our internal capacity to move from a place of love and courage. If we don't build that, we will not have what we need to deal with the systems that we're facing. I know probably people have heard Dr. King's quote that love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend. And the notion that darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light that can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. And I'm not saying this just to be mamby-pamby. Like, we are up against some really, really deep, old human issues. And they will not be shifted by yelling at people across a voice. They will require a totally different force than what many of our movements have been moving from in the past, or in the recent past. I think we can turn back to movements that we've seen in our history that have moved from a deeper place of love, that have moved from a place of trying to bring people together, that have moved from a place of building in community. But I would say most of what I've grown up with has been marches and rallies, and things that tend to be a mobilization of the already convinced, as opposed to an engagement to try to invite new people in. And we will have to invite new people in order for this to move forward. So this deep spiritual practice that transforms us and makes us the kind of people that can show up in a different way so that we can do the next piece, which is deep solidarity. And that solidarity work should all start in our neighborhood and grow beyond. So we should start planted where we are and then grow beyond that. Just want to take a moment to ask, how many people can say you know the people that live on both sides of you? Okay. I'm hoping that Vermont might be in a little bit of a better place than some of us in some of the cities. But I will say, I asked that question in my church, and some people didn't even know the people that live. We have a place where a lot of us live in triple decker. So there's 3 people. And like, some of us haven't even talked beyond here is your mail to the people that live like in the same building as us. But many folks said, okay, fine. If I do know their names, but I don't know them. I don't have deep relationships with them. And, I do believe that rural communities are in better shape. I do think that smaller communities are in better shape. But I would say on the whole, our country does not have enough. We have seen the fabrics of our local communities erode in really challenging ways, and we have not paid attention to them and addressed them in the way that we need to. And so the solidarity does really begin around you and extends beyond. Because how can you not know the person that lives next to you, but then travel 2 towns over to be in solidarity with people that are further away? And I'm not saying that work doesn't need to happen, but I think it has to radiate out. And we can't do it if we don't know the people that we are in. I was meeting yesterday with a Buddhist leader who's been engaging his congregation around building watershed relationships, asking themselves, who's along our river, and how do we begin by the people right next to us? But imagine that we go down that river, around that watershed, down, see who's on the other side of that stream, so that we have that sense of still deep connectedness. We will still need to take it beyond there. We will still need to get to the point where Vermonters and Arizona, I don't know how you describe it, but folks from Arizona and folks from Vermont feel connected. Folks from California and folks from Iowa feel connected. We do need to reweave a we in this country, but we've got to start it by doing it right in the places that we are. If we don't have strong local communities, we're never going to have a sense of national community. And so I think that is our second spot. So that deep inner practice that starts with us, that helps us to embrace love, that helps us to look at who we are and how we can show up in a better way. And then the making the connection to the people right around us and growing that out. And finally, a deep sense of mission and possibility. And that also will need to start in our local communities and build out. We need to start feeling like when we show up for each other, with each other, we can imagine possibilities that were not there before. It's not going to be because somebody tells you. It's going to be because you see it. And because your neighbors say, actually, we need you. We need the skill set that you have on this thing that we're working on. Come on over and help us. And that will sometimes mean really putting our hands in the soil. My husband and I are part of a collective of 10 folks that own a farm together in New Hampshire, in Loudon, New Hampshire, which I don't know if folks on the call know Loudon. Not very many people know Loudon, except if you're a NASCAR fan, because we do have the NASCAR trap for New Hampshire. The New Hampshire Motor Speedway is in Loudon. But anyway, we have a farm, and the joy of our life is that 6 or 7 times during farm season, we invite people up, most of them from the city, sometimes our neighbors from right around us. We just get our hands in the soil, growing food. And sometimes the best part is when we get to pick the food right out of the farm and make a salad and eat it together. These things that we used to do all the time, we've allowed to erode for who knows what else we're doing. I went back and looked at my own life and I was like, what am I doing with all the time that I don't spend cooking food and doing the things that I need to live? How many of you have been told this thing is going to save you so much time, and you get down with the latest technology that you believe is going to allow you to have more time to do the things that really matter, and then you look up and you even have less time than you thought you had before? I do think we are in a moment where we really have to get back to some very basic things. We have to be deeply human. And part of the reason I'm suggesting we do that in our local community is because I also believe that will come from building deeper relations and deeper connection with our non-human siblings. We're confused, they are not. And so some of what we need to do is learn from them. Some of what we also need to do is learn from some of our folks who haven't forgotten these ways, some of our indigenous siblings, some of our older folks who remember what it was like before there was an internet. I do remember pre-internet, but I've been deeply shaped by it. I do remember when we had no phones and when we had dumb phones, before we had these things that take up all our time. And so I want to suggest that the answer to this moment is not throwing ourselves 100% into resistance. Not that we should do none, but to start building the seeds of who we want to be and how we want to be, and inviting our neighbors in. Because I think the reason that a lot of people that we love, and some of us know and respect, chose what they chose is because I don't think that the options many of us were offering felt real or inviting or possible. And I do believe that really leaning in on that local level to do the kind of restorative work we need to is going to create opportunities and possibilities. And unfortunately, the reality is they're going to also be necessary because many of the things that took centuries to build are being stripped away, destroyed very quickly. I hope, and I will be fighting like heck, that our healthcare system, for instance, is not totally destroyed. But if it is, We'll need to step in for each other. We'll need to figure out how to be there for each other. We'll need to figure out how to feed each other. We'll need to figure out a lot, unfortunate, of basic need things that actually are going to create some opportunities for us to connect, for us to grow together, for us to do things with each other and for each other. That, quite frankly, we've been used to outsourcing to the government, to big companies, whatever different things that we've relied on rather than each other in this moment. And so I want to stop my talking and really lean in to asking you to reflect on this moment. I want to get us in conversation. I hope that this has started the conversation and started you thinking, but I want you to actually lean in to imagining. And so I'm going to give you 2 questions, and they're not 100% disconnected. You can choose which one of them. And then we're going to actually go into some breakout rooms for folks to have some time to talk and then come back together. So let me switch over to my other screen. So the first question is a question of imagination. And I want to concede that so many times we are hearing terrible things. Okay. I want you to spend some time thinking about what is one opportunity or possibility that has come across your mind in the last month. A gap that you've seen, or something that's just sparked your imagination that you could imagine working on with your neighbors. So that's just a first question. Just want you to think about it. And it could be something that you thought was terrible, but I want you to think about that thing and reframe it. Where is there an opportunity? An opportunity to lean in, an opportunity to reimagine, an opportunity to create something. That's the first question. The second question is around deep connection. And I was gonna shot pepper with a bunch of stats, but I just skipped them. But how many people have read the book or heard of the book Bowling Alone? Okay, so a couple people. So it's basically this long longitudinal study that looks at how many relationships Americans have and all of the different civic units we used to have. So it looks at how many bowling clubs there used to be in America and the fact that there has been this major decline in bowling clubs, right? But it's just one data point that helps to illustrate something more, which is that the number of things that we associate with other people at, whether it's bowling or church or, the 4-H club, there were just lots of different things that brought us together that have disappeared or been severely weakened. So my second question is I want you to imagine a place in your local community, a place or a ritual or an event in your local community that either brings people together decently already or that has fallen off, that you could imagine reviving or strengthening or recruiting people into so that people felt a deep sense of place and connection. So I want you to sit with either of those. I'm going to give you 2 minutes for you to just reflect on those. And then we're going to send you into breakout rooms to share that. So the first is an opportunity, a gap, something that you've heard that you're I want to do something about this, right? Or the second is a resource that you've already seen. You've already seen it move in your community. Maybe it's not in its heyday, maybe it's not its pinnacle, but you see it as a place of possibility. So I'm going to literally give you a minute more to sort of reflect on that. And then while we do that, Heather, if you're going to go ahead and arrange people into rooms, you'll have 10 minutes in those rooms to just share either that opportunity or that gathering place, and share with each other. And then we'll come back. We'll hear from you, but you'll also have the opportunity to ask me some questions if you want to engage that way. We can definitely go there. But yeah.
I just wanted to say I am so grateful to be on this call to hear you. It's been very inspiring, and I feel you're spot on. I've been thinking about some of the same things you have, but haven't been able to put it all together and articulate it. And I agree, and especially about how dispassionate, unhopeful this younger generation is, and what can we do to help that? And we need more than resistance. We need to lift up and help. And I so appreciate you packaging it so beautifully in a way that I can understand it a little bit more and wrap my brain around it.
Yeah, well, I think that, speaking about young people, there's no movement that's been successful without the energy of young people. And so making sure that we are addressing what is not just a mental health crisis. Like, that is part of how it's manifesting. But I think there's a deep sadness that they feel like they're being handed a world.
I agree.
That's like a mess.
Yeah.
And people are actively making it worse at the same time.
But you were right. They were sold a bill of goods that something would change. And so how do you provide the real hope?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, we're a small enough crew. Let's go ahead. You can throw things in the chat if you have questions. If you have a reflection, let's lean in. I really believe, to be honest with you, the change we need is going to happen in smaller calls like this. I'm actually grateful that it's not like 80 of us and we got to manage all this. So let's talk. What do you see? Are there things that resonated for you? Does anybody have an example of something beautiful in their community that they want to build on? So Reb, why don't you get us started?
So I'm just wanting us to remember, I'm in my 70s now, but I remember my great-grandmother's life. And my great-grandmother she lived very close to the earth. She was down there with Sharon in the southern part of the United States. And it wasn't that long ago. Mm-hmm. It wasn't that long ago. We have memory that can help us in these times of overwhelming challenge. So I just want to hold up our elders and how important it is for us to listen and to absorb and to think about how that translates in the world today. And it was all about community. It was all about surviving with community. So here we are, folks. Thank you.
Yeah. I think that's really important. I think if you look at so many of our traditions, storytellers, the people who hold those collective memories, were revered as like very important. And I think, one of my big dreams, so I went to go visit some of my parishioners who live in New Hampshire, not far from Portsmouth, and they live in a senior community that was about sort of seniors being able to live together, but intentionally set up to be far more communal, right? What I said to them is it just seems so crazy to me. Like, I wish that our schools were built next to like our senior communities, because I believe that our children would have a deeper sense of hope and rootedness and awareness if they could hear those stories And I think it would give our seniors like a greater sense of purpose and joy to have the kids around. And it's just ridiculous that these two groups that like need each other, the way our society is set up, we actually separate them out and put them. It just seems so ridiculous that that's how we do it. So thank you for that. I do think reviving those stories is really, really important. Other reflections, things that folks were talking about, things in your community that you think are worth leaning into. Rebecca. Oh no, did we lose?
There. No, I'm here. I just it took a minute for me to unmute. Some of the things that came up when we were talking among the three parties that spoke in our breakout room were things you can do that don't require any kind of, sort of political statement. That, for instance, one couple was saying that there's junked barbed wire along the roads where they live because maybe people used to keep sheep there, but it's been there a long time. And it's dangerous for kids, for dogs, for people, and that they'd like to organize just with their neighbors to collect it and bring it to, metal recycling. And then my husband in our town, he's part of an energy committee that has been organizing it's going to be sort of a presentation, but
flood forum.
Yeah, a flood forum. It's about the fact that, floods are here. They're real. They're going to happen. And we need, as a community, to be able to respond to them well. And that also, it affects everybody, regardless of who they voted for. So I think that, when you build that base of work together, then if you start to have discussions about, how you abstract to bigger political, questions, I think you have a much better chance of having a good conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Rebecca. I think you're absolutely right. I think that those small interactions build the kind of relationship that will allow the container for those more challenging conversations. If you try to go in for those challenging conversations right away, you all know how that's going to end up. We've seen it. And so, yeah, I completely agree. Todd, did you want to respond or add?
Rebecca, you had mentioned a flood forum. What town are you in? I work in the Vermont Rivers program. This is public education outreach on flood resilience is one of my chief focuses. What town are you in?
She's in Stratford.
Stratford. Well, that's good. All right. Now, if you go on our Vermont Rivers program webpage, you can get my contact information. And for all of you in your towns, this is a big focus of my job in the last 8 years is public education outreach on flood resiliency. And I got one meeting tomorrow night down in Newfane. I talk too much. Contact me, please.
Thank you, Todd, for offering that as a resource. And I think, again, that notion that we begin to build based on the things we see right in our communities, based on the river that runs through our community, based on, for me, I'm close to the ocean, but I think most of you are rivers and streams, not so much ocean. But I really do believe that the reweaving of community is an absolute necessity to push back on dehumanization, because it's very easy to blame people that you don't feel connected to imagine that those people over there are out to get you. And you're never going to feel a sense of connection to people 100 miles away or 1,000 miles away if you do not feel rooted in the community that you're in right now. That's just not how it works. And so I think that work that you do to lean in on the things in your local river watershed, in your local community, and making people feel a part stretches their hearts wide enough that you can keep stretching, and we can start feeling connected to and start feeling related to and in conversation with people beyond. So yeah, Regina. Yes.
I have a house in Vermont, but I live in Connecticut. I spend a lot of time in Vermont, and over the years that I've been in Vermont, I always felt like Vermont was more forward thinking and progressive than Connecticut. But lately, I think Connecticut has been stepping up, and there's one program that I just wanted to mention because it really sparked something in me when I heard about it. And it goes along with what you were just saying about bringing the generations together. There's a program at Quinnipiac University. So nearby are senior living facilities, and they're going to make housing available there to the Quinnipiac University students for free. And it matches up the two generations together in the same facility. And so if the college students spend a certain number of hours with the senior citizens in the facility, they get free housing. So I just wanted to mention that. I hear a lot of things, but that really sparked something in me when I heard that. Like, how fantastic is that for, especially in Connecticut, coming up with a program like that?
Yeah. So actually, Regina, that's a intervention that's been growing across the world. And I want to tell the story of some of how that started, because I think it's really inspirational. In Europe, and I'm trying to remember what year was the European heat wave. Does anybody remember? Anyway, so there were in Europe there was a really devastating heat wave, 2003, and it happened over July and August, and it led to 70,000 deaths. Italy, France, Spain, Germany. We heard about it in the U.S., but not at the scale it happened. And the large majority of those deaths were seniors living by themselves. Many of them lived in the most expensive cities. So Paris got hit really badly. There were very expensive cities, and people had owned their homes for a long time, but their children, because the cost of living had risen so much, couldn't afford to live there. And so often they lived in the city, but their kids lived in a suburb or someplace else. And when the heat waves hit, it caused all sorts of energy problems, all sorts of things. And many people died by themselves in their homes. And it was just devastating. And it was one of those moments where you see how, climate change is what we call a threat multiplier. And so after that, a lot of people sort of started saying, like, it maybe isn't the best for seniors to just be living by themselves and nobody is available to support and check on folks. And you had a similar problem, which is that the housing prices were so high that even though young people were sometimes getting into the top universities in Paris, because there were not enough dormitory units, sometimes they were turning down their acceptances or commuting really long distance to get to school. And so people came up with the idea, what if we could create matches where you had seniors who are living in the heart of Paris in these apartments, often they have another bedroom, and young people who cannot afford to live in the city but need, a place. And so they would create these matches where the mostly students would agree to do some level of grocery shopping and cooking and things like that. And then the senior would provide them either free or sometimes extremely reduced rate, rental units, which also helped some people to stay in their homes who couldn't have, would have taxes that were beyond what they're, anyway. And so what started off as a horrific problem for both groups actually found a solution in connecting them with each other. And that has also, there's a similar project in the city of Boston and Cambridge, but it has gone around the world. And I think it's, again, this kind of opportunity to reimagine our communities, to look at what are real problems and to recognize that the deeper root of them is a lack of connectedness, a lack of sharing, and we need a little bit of creativity to think about how we might solve multiple problems in sort of unique reweaving ways. So I think I'm glad to hear, Regina, that is happening in Connecticut. I think it's an example of a solution that is out there, and we really should be growing it. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time with us tonight. And thank you all. It's good to see several familiar faces. I would say I'm coming to you as a fellow pastor. I'm a pastor here locally nearby in Taftsville, Vermont. And one, I want to share something in response to your question, but two, then I want to ask you another question just for guidance. So in response to your two questions on imagination and connectedness, you shared, you invited us within the past month. One thing that happened, my congregation, I'm a Mennonite pastor, but we had a group of people that happened to be from a Mormon church just checking out our church. I also had my friend Eileen, who's a local rabbi, as a guest speaker. And then the Mormon folks were interested in a presentation on Passover that my friend Eileen, as a rabbi, was presenting. I could tell you just layers of story. And I started to think of this idea, common ground for the common good, where there's things we hold in common. Like even Mormons were interested to understand. I'm not saying Mormons, they almost seem like bonus Christianity plus, if you know a little bit about Mormon theology. But we all have this common interest in Passover, and maybe some common interest in caring for the earth came up too. So I see opportunities to build bridges, connection, and so forth. But I also see challenges within congregational contexts where part of what I feel we're called into right now is calling people into transformation, like collective transformation, calling the individual responsibility that's related to that collective transformation. We're calling people into repentance. And so that's hard. But how do you do that well in an age where you spoke to technology. We have technology increasingly telling us our lives can be more comfortable. We can control the climate in our homes, blah, blah. But how do we invite people into the discomfort of changing, in a congregational context, even? Because you start to lose people. People will leave your church if you call it too much discomfort. Do you have guidance on this?
So, Steve, you are asking the same question I'm asking. I literally had a conversation with one of my parishioners today. We have this group, and so I won't say all of the details of them because they, maybe they'll run across this, and I don't want to say anything to you guys that I haven't said to them. And I'm literally praying about how I say to them. But we have this really great project that we imagined. It's amazing. And in our congregation, I've been saying for a few years that everything we do has to have those three components of spiritual practice, the building of beloved community, and our mission in the world. I've said to them, we're not doing anything at this church that doesn't hold all three of those things. So you have this group that's doing this project. It's a great project. I'm excited about it. We imagined it. It's had so many ups and downs, and we've had to raise money, all these things. And they want to meet. They're meeting every other week for 1 hour. And there's just no way you can do this kind of transformative project. We're renovating a house. You cannot handle the logistics of renovating the house and build the community relationships we want to build and think through the program of how the house is going to function in 1 hour every other week. It's just not real.
And that creates fatigue for people. Like if you even tried to do that, because you're working.
Yeah, because it's just not going to work.
Yeah.
And so the leader ends up getting really stressed out, and she keeps asking for help, and and I'm just like, we need to have some hard conversations with ourselves about, do we really want the social change that we say we do? Because if we do, we've got to do a little bit more than what we're doing, which may mean we also have to do a little less. I mean, one of the things I've been thinking through is, where the heck is all my time going? Because I keep feeling like I don't have time for the things that matter. And I'm literally thinking about clocking myself. Like, what am I doing with my time? I am guessing more of it is going to social media than I would like to imagine. Did anybody get this thing where your phone tells you how many hours that you're spending on it? And you're like, I cannot possibly be spending all those hours. But I'm like, I don't think it's lying to me, right? And so I think the reality is, and I was actually talking with Ginevra and Heather about this while you were, I am in a moment of saying, I've been literally praying, God, what is my highest and greatest purpose in this moment? We're in a bad place. And I think it is really, I believe that it is possible that our greatest moment as humans, as people who care about justice, as people of faith, could come out of this season. I believe that it is possible. But I don't believe it is possible if we continue operating the way we've been operating. It will not produce new results. And in order to do some things, you have to let go of other things. And so I do think, Steve, I'm not saying I have some magic sauce. I literally am praying through my May series, because I am about to preach some sermons that are going to be so direct. And I can already guess at least one person is going to leave, at least. But I've been coupling that with a deep prayer for every member of my congregation. Because I don't think we are a small church. We don't have any of the big frills or any of that. If you're coming to us, I believe it's because you really do want to see change in the world. You really do want to see justice roll down like a mighty river, and righteousness like overwhelming stream. You want to see that. I've got to believe that the craziness of this moment has got to have my parishioners asking the same questions that I'm asking about, what do I need to do and who do I need to be differently for something new to emerge? And my hope is that a combination of honest truth, the reality of this moment, and divine intervention will help enough of us to want to journey towards something more powerful than what we're doing right now. Because I really believe lukewarm is not going to cut it in this season. We're either going to go in and make an evolutionary leap as a human species, or we're going down a drain. I kind of feel like those are our two options. And I pray that enough of us look at this moment and say, I do not want to go further down this path. I want to do something different. But I'm going to tell you, I do not have some secret sauce for how you ensure that happens. But I will say, from my own tradition, I've been saying to myself, and I said to one of my folks today, because she's the leader of this, she's one of the facilitators of this group, and she's like, she was like, Pastor, I think you just need to tell them we have to have a moment. And I said to her, if I believe that prayer works, I'm going to have to lean in right now. I'm not saying everybody is going to go with it, but I have to believe that enough of them feel, as I do, that this is I cannot look back on this moment and not think I put everything in to help. We can't hand this kind of world to our young people. The planet's falling apart. Fascism is like this can't, no. So I'll tell you how it works out. Maybe I won't have a job and I'll be coming up to hang out with you. I don't know if you have an extra bedroom, but no,
I do, but I would go to your church. So if someone leaves and I lose my job, I'll drive down.
All right. Well, you're welcome to come hang out with us.
So,
but I do think this may be the moment where we can reckon with the fact that there's a major disconnect between what we say we want and what we are giving and what we are putting in to making that happen. Yeah, Reb. Unfortunately, I think a lot of us are going down the drain before we go to the next level of deep spiritual practice, solidarity, and a sense of mission. Yes, and I want to say this. I think that a lot of people, there's a number of people for whom it's going to have to get worse until they are open. But I think there's enough of us that have a hope for a deep desire for a world where there's a kind of love and there's a kind of connectedness, and where we stop living beyond the limits of what the planet can give. Like, I believe there are enough of us, but I do believe that even among us, we've embraced some habits that are not viable and they're not real. Saying that we care about people without talking to them. If we care about people, we've got to be willing to sit with them. And not just when they say what we want to hear. We've got to be able to invest in those kinds of relationships over the long term so we can have those hard conversations from a place of love and trust. And that doesn't develop with a sign at a rally. And I've done my fair share of it. I just emceed the rally in Boston. I'm not anti, but even at the rally, I said, who are you going home to talk to? Not yell at, but listen to and build with and create, connection and community with. So, I wish we had done all of that before now and we were activating that to respond to this moment, but we didn't. So we just need to get over that and ask, how do we in this moment put time into building that? Because love is the only force strong enough to counter what we're dealing with, and it doesn't grow overnight. So yes, I do think it's going to get worse before it gets better. Steve, the one thing I will say out of our tradition is I honor so many other traditions and I've learned so much from them. And I feel like, again, Jesus did it beautifully. And so part of what I'm asking is, can we just look at his life? Can we just say, what did he actually do? And could we just try to just copy that? I mean, it's a radical, crazy idea in Christianity that we might just try to live like Jesus. And that maybe we focus on that. And then all the other things that are not that, we can get to those when we're done actually pulling this off, which means we'll never get to those things, right? But all the things we put our energy into that are not about that. So, I think there is a way, at least from what I know of our tradition, and I do think, like, I'll say this as to people of faith, like, it does feel to me like we have some resources that have been around a long time, and we might want to just tap back into them. I'm not against people who want to create something new. Do you? I'm just saying, I'm not sure that I'm smart enough to create something new. I would rather cheat off somebody else's paper on this one and revive and access the things that have already been there. And I think that to your point, Reb, like there are stories people have lived before. We have lived more simply when we didn't have these phones. You know what? People like met and like hung out and got to know people, and they didn't even have those. It's crazy. So what were the ways they did that? How do we reinvigorate those things? And I hope, I think not many people mention an event. And so maybe there are not as many of them around. Maybe you need to go back into your town archives and see, what were they doing 30 years ago that we could bring back? What were they doing 10 years ago that we can bring back? But a lot of them were probably really simple, and we don't need super complex, overly fraught things. We just need the things that allow us to show up in a beautiful place and talk to people about the things that matter. And food is an important lubricant that people have been using since the beginning of time. So, Facebook has nothing on a good potluck. And so just really thinking about how we revive those things. Yeah. So Jenny, you're going to get the last word, and I think then we're closing out.
Hey, so when I came here as priest in partnership at the Episcopal Church here in Norwich, St. Barnabas, the encourager, there had been close to a 3-year transition between clergy, and one of the things that the congregation took in was a program called Sharing Our Stories. So that each person, because they recognized that they don't really know each other anymore, that the congregation had so many ups and downs and changes. So, but it didn't take really a very long time to get through the whole congregation. So then we started alternating for townspeople to come and share their story. And it's always a potluck. And Jesus isn't there if we don't have a potluck. I'm just saying, we got to share the food. I mean,
I mean, he knew how to do it. Like, he was just masterful. He was like, I'm about to tell you some big stuff, but have some bread first.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much for hearing that. And it's a simple program, but it kind of works. And it could work in any kind of community gathering. Like we have a pretty strong historic society, and our library is strong. We all kind of do our version of that. But it's been a really good thing. So thanks for listening.
Thank you. So I'm just really thankful. I just want to say I am in the process of figuring this out, in the process of asking myself, how can I help us to find a way through this moment to emerge stronger and better and loving more. And so I thank you all for being, other than my congregation, who I test these things out on all the time. I thank you for listening, for being game to lean in. And I ask for your prayers or well wishes, because I do think this is a critical moment for us, not just as our country, as a human species. We this is about addressing the climate crisis and the human love crisis and all of the different pieces, because they are inextricably linked. And so I thank you, and I look forward to hearing about some of the things that you will do together. Ginevra and Heather have said that they're gonna, send some things out, and I look forward. And I will share my Substack, because that's a space where I'm trying to, gather people and do this. But one thing I will add, there's a real fun podcast called Divine Intervention. That's the story of the Catholic anti-war movement in Dorchester, the neighborhood that I live and have my congregation in. And one of the stars of that show is Marianne Hughes, is a member of our congregation. And if you are looking for a little fun, I mean, it is a cast of characters. I got to hang out with a bunch of them last night, and they are, I mean, one of them, she was like, she has a quote in the thing, something like, I'm not really that experienced in breaking and entering. And so it tells you the story. They were the first people to bring someone into sanctuary after more than 400 years of the Catholic Church not doing that. And so they were the ones that the immigration movement was built off of and things like that. And so the point you brought up, Reb, it's a way to reignite our stories of the past and recognize that we've seen tough times before and we have moved through, and we can do so now. So thank you all so much.
Thank you so much. We moved through a lot of things there. Religion, environmentalism, youth, food, a lot of food. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. I won't keep anyone longer, just to say thank you to you, Reverend Mariama, for joining us. And thank you to everyone else who joined us as well. I think this is an exciting conversation for us because we're so local here in Vermont. We're so small, we're so rural, we're so local. It's perfect for us. And the concepts you touched on are really easy to see here. So thank you very much for sharing Earth Day with us, or the day after Earth Day with us, and to everyone else for joining. And I hope you have a good evening.